Welcome to the Nick Blevins Family Ministry Podcast. Our goal is to help you maximize your church's potential. You'll hear from top leaders in children's, student, and family ministry about the principles and practices they use. Now here's your host, Nick Blevins.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 205 of the podcast, where we're going to talk with the church that I think is doing the best job with Instagram and children's ministry. And that's Clent Wells from James River Church and James River Kids. If you search them on Instagram, look at their handle there, you'll see that I'm probably right. They're one of the churches I think that does the best job there. Gwinnett Church Kids is another one that I think does a great job. So Clent and I talk about two things. We talk about social media and Instagram and how they do what they do, who's their target audience, how do they manage that social media? Is it a schedule? Do they just spontaneously post things? We also talk about what James River Kids Ministry looked like going online after COVID-19 hit, and then now in person when they started gathering again. So you can get all the links and notes at nickblevins.com/episode 205. If you listened last week, you know that there's a ton of stuff coming up right now to help you as a leader. So I want to make sure you're aware of all of that. If you're listening to this when it comes out, like the day it comes out, then we're having volunteer boot camp tomorrow, September 30th. However, if you miss it, no worries. You can be able to catch it on demand. Just go to ministryboost.org, look for volunteer boot camp. We're talking about how to shepherd and care for your volunteers now, how to reactivate volunteers from the bench, how to redefine and reorganize your teams for new roles that are needed now in the season that we're in with in-person and online and all of that. There's also a new course that we're going to be giving away. We're going to do it live and we're going to give it away for free called Volunteer Reboot. But you have to register for the Orange Kids Ministry Exchange or Youth Ministry Exchange to get access for free. You'll also be able to get access as a member if you become a Ministry Boost member, which that is also opening up tomorrow. There's lots of stuff going on as I say this out loud. But anyway, we're going to launch this Volunteer Reboot 6-week course. It'll start the end of October, right after Orange's KMX and YMX events happen. So if you register through our link at Ministry Boost, that's how you'll get access to it. Just go to ministryboost.org, look for that link, register for KMX or YMX, and then forward your receipt to info@ministryboost.org, and we'll get you registered for that. We are just 2 days, I guess, removed from when the deadline will be for ordering custom designed boxes. If you've heard us talk about these custom designed boxes that you can use in your ministry to send to families each month, to kind of put your ministry in a box for those families who are not attending in person, but you want to equip them more at home, go to ministryboost.org, look for the box link there, or just go to ministryboxed.com and you can order boxes. And again, you might want to be thinking about Christmas, Advent, and doing boxes for something like that. I know a lot of us in our churches are doing that. And then next week, I'm going to have Mallory Wright on the podcast. She shared on the podcast, you're going to love that. We talk all about kids ministry on YouTube, but she also shared the videos she put together for training their volunteers as they were, launching in-person kids ministry again. And those are in the Ministry Boost Facebook group. So just search for that group, join it, look for Mallory's videos if you're interested, especially if you haven't launched in-person kids ministry yet. You'll love checking out those videos. So there you go. Tons of announcements, lots going on. Ministry Boost membership opens again tomorrow, and it hasn't been open since March. So that's exciting. We got a lot more stuff in there, a bunch of bonuses and resources for becoming a member. And we're really excited because for the first time ever now, there's going to be a price that gets your whole staff in. So your whole staff in, really affordable for just a monthly price that gets your entire staff trained and resourced through Ministry Boost. But that's all you need to hear from me about announcements. So let's go ahead and listen to my interview with Clent Wells of James River Church. Hey, Nick Blevins here, and I'm here with Clent Wells from James River Church. Welcome, Clent.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How you doing?
Doing good. Yeah, life is good, and getting ready for church tonight. So it's good week.
So how about you tell us a little bit about you, your family, and James River Church?
Yeah, absolutely. My wife and I have served in kids and family ministry since 2006. Here at the church, and we joke we kind of stumbled across it, very similar to most of the kids pastors that I hear. It's, hey, we have a problem, we need help. can you come in? And so we're volunteering. My wife and I are both actually, our background is education. And so we were both elementary school teachers and just loved the church and served the church. And so, it was around that time that we were asked to step into full-time as children's pastors here at the church. And then since then, the church has grown, so James River is a multi-site church. So we have four campuses, and my wife and I serve as the next gen pastors, and primarily oversee the elementary ministry. So that would be kind of our direct oversight, but have influence over all of the family ministries all the way up through 12th grade. And we love it.
That's awesome. And I wanted to talk with you for a few reasons, but certainly one of them is James River Kids, and I wasn't sure how much you knew this, but in the children's ministry world is known as having great social media and just great media in general. Like, you guys crush it with media, social media, all that stuff. And so I guess my big question is, tell us how. Tell us what you do, how you do it. What does that look like?
That's a great question. I mean, the simple answer is recruiting great people that are, talented and building a team. But I think from a leader standpoint, recognizing that, one, how critical, that is to be, to extend the engagement, beyond just what we can do in person. One of the things that, always thinking about is we recognize that we have an opportunity to create a moment and to create an experience for kids when they're here on the weekend, or we have a midweek service. So we talk a lot about that with our team, is like, hey, let's not, we want to do everything we can to create those moments that ultimately lead to kids having an experience that they're going to go home talking about, that they're going to be able to reflect on. But then especially as social media, took off, realizing the opportunity that if we can make multiple connections during the week that trigger something, or that triggers, a memory or something that took place in person, that's going to build just a stronger foundation, a stronger connection, and a stronger drive. And so don't view those as like in competition with one another, but really viewed it as like, hey, this is just ways for us to actually strengthen that, commitment. And so, I would say when we originally started, it was very, very similar to just did what we knew to do, which was, giving parents a sheet each week when they left of like, hey, this is what I learned. These are the things I have. Here's some things that you could do at home. But we have 5 kids, and even just seeing in our own home, how many of those actually made it to the fridge and made it to like, all right, kids, now we're going to sit down and do our devotions that the kids pastor, who happened to be me, just in life, realizing like we've got to expand that and make it where, parents can have connections that are shorter and are meeting them where they're at. So that's probably like really when the thought behind, engaging in that. And then since then, we've tried a lot of different things and are constantly looking at how can we, create different types of engagement with families.
Yeah. And you were saying that, we were talking before, that it's been maybe 4 or 5 years since you really put an emphasis on it. And like I said, now it's like it's known. I think a lot of children's ministries around the country follow yours just as an example and to learn and all for ideas. So maybe you could walk us through, like, what are some things, maybe we'll start here. What are some of the channels you use for social media? And then what do you put on them typically in a week?
Yeah. Primarily, we primarily focus on Instagram right now. We haven't dove in, a lot of the other, like James River Kids doesn't have a TikTok channel, and maybe pretty soon no one will have a TikTok channel. I don't know.
Yeah, true.
But we do keep Facebook, up. We do maintain a YouTube channel, and if post everything is there as well. But primarily through Instagram, for parents, and that's part of realizing that our target is honestly not a lot of the kids, by the time our fifth graders get in, some of them, have their own social media accounts, but it's primarily parents, and it's primarily, honestly, it's primarily the moms that we're, marketing to. And so that really just has caused us to, constantly look at like, okay, we're trying to reach the lost by reaching young families. And so what does a young, mom that maybe doesn't have any, connection with the church, what is she going to be drawn to? What is she going to be like, oh, I like, seeing this. And so really the person that oversees our social media, most of her inspiration isn't coming from a lot of necessarily, church or religious, type sources. It's looking at, what is trending, secular, like what's the different, pop-up clothing brands or different, things that are, that when you just see, you just want to look at, like recently I was sitting there and we were just looking through, I don't know if you've heard of it's called Museum of Ice Cream. It's like the ice cream, museum.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing, but their social media is unbelievable, and, I can't recommend it to a child, to go look at, because it's not all church approved. But just the way that they engage and interact, it makes you want to sit there and dive in deeper. And so that really would be the why, behind what we do is like, we want to cause parents to feel really excited about the brand that they're interacting with, and so that's a lot of what I talk with our team, about is any interaction we have with families is they're interacting with the brand. Now we realize, hey, the product is a relationship with Jesus Christ, a life, with him and with kids. We're developing this foundation and all those things. So like, we recognize that's what we're ultimately trying to get to. But the first entry point to that is just, how do people feel about interacting with the brand of James River Kids? And so we try to focus on working to the best of our ability with the time and resource we have on just making parents excited about like, man, we love the brand of James River Kids.
Well, and I think you're winning. I think that's working because, like, I know I love the brand of James River Kids as someone who watches from afar. What are some of the things, and maybe you have, like, I don't know, I'm going to ask now, do you have, like, a system, like, every week we kind of put these things on there, and then we add in other stuff that's more off the cuff or, spontaneous? Or is it mostly, no, we just try to think about it all the time, and, oh, you know what, we should put that on there, and we should put that on there. Like, how does that work? How do you know what to put on that channel?
It's a little bit of all of it. I wish I could say that it's always like, hey, we sit down and have this, master plan. But I think that's the thing about social media is you have the ability to make changes in real time and respond to what needs to be responded to. So, for example, right now, our social media looks totally different because the church is in 21 days of prayer and fasting. And so there's also the aspect of, we understand that like our primary purpose is to be a champion of the church and not just the champion of the kids brand. And so right now it looks very heavy towards the 21 days of prayer and fasting because that's what we're championing as the church. And so whereas a lot of times, we would say, okay, we want it to all kind of, flow together, and between, the stories and the feed, that all is telling one story. Right now, the only story it's telling is, hey, we're encouraging parents and kids to engage in prayer. And so right now, just every day, it's a different short, IGTV video that is a devotion for the kids to do, that they can do or follow along, where we can pray with them, where they can feel like they're participating in it as well. At other times, especially when it's leading up to an event, whether that's camp or whether that's a fall event, there's going to be a lot more strategy involved. Okay, what are different types of posts that we need that are going to, catch people's attention, but also give them information that's going to ultimately, like, hey, we're trying to say, you need to register for this. You need to be a part of this. You don't want to miss this. But we're going to do that through a lot of different angles and things. So, so it's a little bit of both and sometimes that gets broken up, so most of the time, I'll sit down, or even just the person that designs it, she'll say, hey, this is the direction that we're going. And she'll create and schedule out posts so that they fit in together into that one big, overall picture, which when people are scrolling through, I mean, that's probably what's eye-catching. So a lot of times people are saying, hey, I like that. And that part of it it would be very complicated for me, but it's not incredibly complicated for her, who has graphic design, background. And she's like, hey, I just create one giant, look, and then I break that up into a grid, and those become our different posts. So.
Yeah, I'm going to share my screen so that people can see some of this while we're talking. And I wanted to ask you, you mentioned somebody that does it. Is it kind of like one person? I mean, you obviously have influence in it. You probably can jump in there and do things at different times. But like, who all is involved? Is it mostly that one person?
It is.
Or is it spread out? That
girl that is the top middle, that is Maddie Walker. Uh-huh. And she's our North Campus kids pastor. She gave herself the title, and I liked it. She's the James River Kids Imagineer. And so nice. She, has an eye for what's going to look good and what's going to, communicate, what the brand is, which essentially the brand is life, so it's like, we want pictures. We want it to communicate like, hey, this is a place where you're going to experience, life. Like, it's going to be fun. It's going to be full. It's going to be, we don't use a lot of muted, colors. Like, we want it to be bright, happy, engaging. And so, that's the goal behind there. The videos is a little bit of a newer thing on seeing that people are more likely to sit there and watch a, 1.5 minute IGTV type video than a really long video. So whenever possible, we use clips there to hopefully drive them to watch the full thing on YouTube. So yeah, you can see a lot of the changes, and you can kind of see in here, like, this is when we were all shut down and doing COVID. Yeah. So that's really when the videos increase, because we have a lot of things in there like video devos and connect that we're trying to make with kids, because we know that they're just at home for hours scrolling through those things.
That's awesome. So you said, and I know there's been points where you were talking about the grid, where there's a certain look to all of it. You said you do that every now and then, but it's not necessarily something you always want to do.
Yeah, and you can kind of, as you get back to pre-COVID, you can see some of that to where it more links in, to one picture, like right there where you're on now is talking about, it's like the what's happening in October, and then you can kind of see everything there ultimately is building up to the October 31st party, which was a huge, outreach that our church has done for years, but that's kind of what I mean in there is like it's building to tell, one big story with the
and you can see the color scheme, like the same background here is in all of these pictures.
Yeah.
Right. And then sometimes they come together and make that one image too, that image on top of an image.
Yeah. It looks like we're like one post away from it, being more of a, complete.
Yeah. You can see it here. The wave goes through. Right. If there was one more post, they'd probably, and of course, people that know social media know the correct term for that, which is not me. So, but that's awesome. Yeah. And it's just I love the bright colors, how it pops, like scrolling through it again for me is a reminder of just how awesome it is. So like for that mom who's not a part of any church, who, has kids and is a young mom, like you said, it does look appealing, right? There's definitely something to that, which I think is a great thing. So that's awesome. Anything else you'd add about what you're doing?
What's that?
Anything else you'd add about what you're doing with social media?
I was just going to say, that's in terms of like my role, like I'm looking at it more from a standpoint of guarding that brand and making sure that, what we're posting accomplishes that, because it's the brand of the children's ministry, but ultimately we're representing James River Church. And so it needs to fit in line, with with those things as well. So those would be a lot of things that I'm looking for. And at different times, there may be something that is more, not serious, but, more serious, that I'm like, hey, I feel like we need to use this as an avenue to communicate, what we're trying to teach the kids, at different times. So,
yeah. I did have this question. I didn't even think about it. I should have, but once I was scrolling through there, because one of the other things that you do a great job of is the pictures of people, which I know that's way more compelling than empty rooms and things like that. So how do you do like photo release? What does that look like? What's that process for you?
We have things posted in the church that say, that have a statement. I'm not sure exactly, what that statement is, that basically lets people know, hey, there's photography, there's video, and it may be used for promotional and marketing purposes. There are, we do have certain kids that, cannot be, pictured for one reason or another. And there'd be certain times where we would request permission, depending on what it was, with that, even if we didn't know. At our camps, that would be one specifically, is that we have, a list of kids that can or cannot have their pictures taken. So it really just depends. But for the most part, if it's just, weekend services, church worship, type avenues, that there's an understanding, that says, hey, like this is, by being here, this is a potential, of having your picture taken. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. A lot of churches do that. Some of them even might build another thing in the release or like in the camp registration or whatever. So that makes a lot of sense too. Yeah. I want to shift gears if we can, because the other thing I want to ask you about, I mean, we could talk about that all day. I love what you do. People need to check that out for sure, is online, children's ministry online. I mean, with COVID hitting and having churches close their doors, everybody, had to pivot to online. You obviously were already doing some great media, so you probably did more of that. But like, what are you doing? What did you do online, and what are you still doing online now that you're gathering in person again?
Yeah. We had until we were forced to think through, how do we, engage a really large, audience. We didn't actually put a whole lot of things out there in terms of what would be like a full service. It would be more little snippets that is promoting the coming and being in person. So everything would be about like, hey, we want to use it to drive in person. And so that was a huge shift on thinking like, what do we do? Initially, everyone, we hit the ground running and saying, okay, let's shift and create what we would call like a snow day experience. Where we live, there would be occasion where we'd have to cancel church completely because of snow or ice. Not very often, but when we would do that, we would try to really quickly put together a snow day service to be able to put that out there. So that one really felt more just like our services, where it's going to have, worship, an introduction to the big idea, a Bible lesson, maybe, a fun element. But just realizing for kids, and especially the younger kids, is we had to shift our engagement of thinking, okay, when you don't have the advantage of the different dynamics and quirks that happen when you're in person, and just the spontaneity. That's probably all children's pastors. That's one of the things they love about kids ministry, is that there's going to be things that happen, when you're with a group of kids that are never going to happen in the main auditorium. Like they're never going to happen, to the senior pastor, where a kid just, shouts out something that you have to pivot, and either make that a teachable moment or do something with that. But you don't have that, in the online. And so we had to create a format that was going to leave kids with I want more, and I can't wait till, something else comes out. So the two things we did is, one, we created a couple different segments that were really, really short, like 5 minutes, that we could just put out there. And we would create a bunch of those. One of them was like a science segment. It wasn't very spiritual. It was more just fun science experiments that we thought most kids could still do at home with things they had at home. And it just ended with saying, man, isn't God's creation amazing? And you're one of God's creations, too. You're his masterpiece. So the purpose, again, was just engaging with the brand, with the church in a different way. We did a fun story time segment where we did kind of like a bedtime story once a week and told it in a really just, illustrated manner. We did a cooking show where we would cook something, with a character. And all of those, again, the purpose behind it wasn't, we want to create this cooking show for kids. It's like, no, we want them to have positive interaction with James River Kids so that it leads them to watching, the overall thing. And so we changed our Wednesday night format to like a show. It was called the That's a Good Idea show. And basically it was just, we want to give kids lots of good ideas, things that they can do at home. So we did a whole show that was about thanking our local heroes, and we would do things with that. But we would use that. Every part of the show had elements where we showed what kids were doing and how they were interacting with us. And so that specifically became a medium for parents to send photos of what their kids were doing at home, parents to send videos of how their kids were doing, the different activities. We would have like a weekly challenge. And that became something that really gave, it kind of just created momentum with that. And then even our Sunday morning experience, we shifted from it just feeling like a at home or feeling like a church service that they would normally have with kids watching at home to feeling more like a show. And so if you go to, James River Kids YouTube, you'll see that shift. There's a show called Backyard Adventures to where that's when we really shifted with that and instantly saw engagement. Because I think like everyone else, we were seeing engagement start to decline with that. And when we switched to that format to where it felt, felt more just like a kid, like a Disney kids show where we had, a cast of characters that were walking them on an adventure. And the only thing that we did that felt, church was they would throw it to like, well, now it's time to see what God's word has to say about that. And then we would teach, the short lesson. But basically it was this cast of characters that were creating the tension for why we needed to get to that anyways. And then, would wrap it up with that. So that's really the kind of the direction that we went with online, is doing things that felt a little bit more like what they were going to be drawn to, to watching as they're scrolling through, Disney or whatever. The advantage of all that is it really kind of created almost like a Disney Plus of church online. And so, we began to promote that of saying, hey, you can go to this platform, which for us was just a web kind of a landing page. And there is literally, hours and hours of content that you can watch. And that was one of the things we saw when we started resuming in person, because we didn't have, we had feedback, and we'd had feedback based on viewership, but parents continually came up and said like, hey, I can't thank you enough. It's like, I don't want to say that like I let, YouTube babysit my kids, but honestly, like parents were working from home and their kids are right there. And they said it was so nice to be able to have something that my kid could engage with for an hour. And I knew that it was safe for them to sit there and scroll through. And if they wanted to watch all the cooking videos again, they could, or whatever it was.
Yeah, I saw somebody like on Instagram or Twitter or something like that. It was like, I should probably pay that YouTuber for raising my kids, the last few months or something. And part of you laughs, it's hilarious. And part of me as a parent, both of my wife and I work full time at home. It's like, I get that. We definitely control their time on there, but it is different than it would be, right? There's different than it would be. Did you said your numbers, you saw them dip like a lot of people did. They came back when you changed that format and got more creative. Overall, how did you feel about those viewership numbers? Was it like, man, it seems like half the people are watching? Because that's a lot of the conversations I had with kids leaders was, if you just looked at views, it was a way less than half of what they saw in person previously, maybe a quarter, or even less than that of what they saw in person previously. How did that work for you? Declined and came back, but overall, was it okay? Or did you feel like a lot of people must not be watching?
Yeah, I think it, one of the things is it took being intentional constantly on how we were promoting it. And so, and I don't fully understand how all of that works with the algorithms, with, commenting and posting and things like that. But I know like we were really, really aggressive, on that. So when we would post like a clip of the new service, there was a really large group that I would text out and say, hey, we just posted this. I need everyone to go on there, like it, comment on it, and share it, so that you can get that out there. So even when we would post it then on YouTube, going on, liking, commenting, and then sharing, it would say, and for some people, you're teaching them how to do that. You're saying, okay, click here, share this. And this time from YouTube, we would say, we want you to share the YouTube link to your Facebook page, and do that. And so all of that was trying to just one, send out the biggest net that we possibly could to get all families, so that as parents are scrolling through, if they didn't catch it on the James River Kids update, that they're going to see it at the top of people's, stories. And sometimes, depending on what it was funny. Like I would sit there and like scroll through my Instagram, and it would literally be like all I would see on people's, stories was the new James River Kids video, which I was like, yay, that's
a win.
Fun. But honestly, if we would let up on that even just a little bit, instantly, like we would start seeing, a decrease. And so we would send out an email to families every single week saying, hey, just posted, it's great, share it with your friends. I would send those text reminders to a large group saying, here's what I need you to do. And that wasn't just staff, it was staff, volunteers, kids. We continued to meet with our volunteers every week and basically letting them know like, hey, you're still building the church, you're still building kids by you simply doing this. Like use your influence to like, to share, to comment, and all of those things. And so Easter, for example, like it was our kids' Easter service, was seen in at the time, and I think it's actually gone up, since then. It was seen in 35 different states. It was seen in over 20 different countries. So we had missionaries and missionary kids, from all across the world saying, thank you so much, for doing that. But we were super aggressive on doing all those things to promote it leading up to it, and had ways for them to respond, and engage, with that. So I think probably the thing I learned, the most is any type of online engagement, social media engagement. It's not something that you can just get to a space and then just say like, oh, it'll just run, it'll just run itself then, it'll just continue to build, momentum. Even with our social media, we worked really, really hard at getting it to 10,000. So for the sole purpose so that we could say, swipe up to watch the rest of this video. And so, we're really aggressive on that, on doing, promotions and, different things. But since we hit that point, weren't as aggressive on, to the extent, and it's still grown, but it's not, it flattened out considerably. And it requires constant attention. So,
yeah, definitely. Last question for you with children's ministry content online. I don't even know this. I feel like I should know this already. But do you write your own curriculum? And so when you were putting content online, you just adapted to film that and record it and do that differently, or you adapt something else? Like how much changed from what you taught live to then what you were doing online?
I think the main thing that changed is, we do write all of our own curriculum. And we're constantly evaluating it. We have a 5-year scope and sequence, but we're making adjustments to that, continually. But when we're in person, it's created somewhat with the assumption of this is a 6-week building block that is all going to link together. It's all going to be very connected. And so in the language of it, it's like, hey, on week 1, we did this, 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 and this. And on week 2, we learned this and this. And today, we're going to add to that piece and make that happen. When we switch to online, is really learned that just like kids watching, like a popular show that they would watch, is we have to accomplish both. We have to make that standalone just as it is, as if that's the only one that they're going to watch. What are they getting from that? And yet still have a link that is, tune in next time for more. So whether it's a cliffhanger, or something that is going to get them excited about, engaging again. And so that would probably be the biggest difference is, the hook became more about finding out what's going to happen to those people, the cast of characters, because kids could relate to that, whereas in person, it's going to be like, hey, come back next week to see what happens, to Joseph next, type of thing, or, along those lines.
Yeah. Well, thanks for taking time to share with us. How can people connect with you and with James River? They need to go follow you on Instagram. They need to check out your videos. I mean, how do they do that?
Yeah, follow us on social media. If you DM us on James River Kids, we'll follow up. We'll get back with you. And honestly, that's how this connection, was made, is through that. And so we will connect. And we love that, honestly. Like, that's such a privilege. And anything that we've done, we've been blessed by having relationships and connections with other people. I think specifically the children's ministry and the next gen ministry world, that's one thing I think that we all excel in, is like we're not closed handed to, this is my stuff. It's like, no, like we want everything we can get from every source. And so we would want to be the same way. You could also, they could email me as well. So it's just cwells@jamesriver.church, and would be glad to, connect with people. So.
Awesome. Well, thanks for what you all do. I'm telling you, it is like the place to go for kids ministry to look at social media. So keep up the great work. Maybe it'll be 20,000 and continue to influence people in and around your church. It's awesome. Thanks, Clent.
Well, thanks, Nick. And thank you for all that you do just to build the kingdom and to try to help everyone, have a bigger picture, about, what's taking place and the opportunities. So appreciate your ministry, and what a blessing you are.
Well, that was great to talk with Clent and hear about James River Kids Ministry online and then in person and both, and, what they did that was successful, what they're still doing, stopping as they meet in person. Like, I love hearing about that from every church. And then also the original point of the conversation to talk about social media and how they have what I think is one of the best Instagram handles for a kids ministry. So action step 1 is easy. Check out James River Kids on Instagram. Action step 2 coming out of that podcast interview is to start your kids or student ministry Instagram, or if your church won't allow that, like a lot of churches, they just want to have one handle for the whole church, which is fine, but make sure you've got a plan to get kids and student content on there similar to how they're doing it in their own channel. And then here's the third one. Use the stories of Instagram to then make highlights that stay there, right? So some of you are listening to this, you know what this means. Some of you are like, you don't know what this means, but you can search it, Google it, you'll figure it out. But I think, how can we use highlights to help new families, new parents in particular? And so we're trying to do that in our church. We only recently launched an Instagram handle for our kids ministry. And one of the things I want to do is have highlights there, so that if you're new to our ministry or our profile, or somebody shares something and you check it out, you could click through those highlights and it would help you get a picture for what our ministry is like, for why, you should come and your kids should be involved, for any questions you might have, right? It might get help with that and kind of orient you to the ministry. So I think that's a great thing to do with our Instagram profiles for kids ministry or student ministry, and even for our church. I mentioned all those things in the beginning. Volunteer boot camp happening tomorrow, but again, you'll be able to watch a replay of it. Orange's KMX and YMX events, and then we're going to give away that volunteer reboot course for free if you register through our link. Ministry boxes, so many things going on, but just go to the show notes at nickblevins.com/episode 205, or just ministryboost.org to check all that stuff out. Next week, we have Mallory Wright on from Mosaic Kids Ministry, talking about YouTube and how they have used YouTube well for kids ministry. And you're going to want to check that interview out, but you're going to hear them all. We got Mike Clear coming up, Todd Lesher, Jamie Dickens, Chris Sasser, tons of leaders that you're going to hear from. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss an episode of this, and I'll catch you next time on the Family Ministry Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Nick Blevins Family Ministry Podcast. We hope this helps you maximize your church's potential. We would love to hear stories of how you apply what you've learned. You can do that by leaving a comment on iTunes or in the show notes at nickblevins.com.